Hi, welcome to another dose of virtual vitamin Z. My name is Stephen, and I'm the curator of Humane Education for the Detroit Zoological Society. Today, let's get started with a game. And the name of this game is the matching game. And the way to play it is that I'm going to share some pieces of information about specific animals and then some photographs of animals. And your job is to match the information or the facts to the photographs. So to get started, here are two facts. The first fact is that this animal can smell prey under 20 feet of snow. And the second fact is that this animal has a sense of smell that's 40 times more powerful than a human's. So one of those facts is about the wolverine, and the other one is about the giant anteater. Which one do you think matches with which animal? So I'll give you a few seconds to think of an answer, and if you'd like, you can add it in the comment section, and then we'll move on to the next pair. All right, the next pair of facts are that this animal smells for prey using their tongues, and then that this animal has a sense of smell 100 times more powerful than humans. So again, one of those is about the gray wolf, and one of those is about the rattlesnake. And I'll give you a few more seconds to think about which one's which, and then add it in the comment section before I move on to the answers. All right, so for this first pair, the top fact was about the wolverine. Wolverines can smell for prey under 20 feet of snow, which is pretty incredible if you really think about what 20 feet of snow would look like. And the reason that, obviously the reason they do this is so that they can find food in the winter. They live in these cold and snowy climates. And if they weren't able to do this, they would have a hard time finding food. So it's really interesting that they're using this sense of smell to help them survive. And the giant anteater has a sense of smell 40 times more powerful than humans. And that's also really hard to comprehend, 40 times. It would be like if it were vision, an animal being able to see 40 times more clearly or further away than we can. Pretty amazing. And again, they use this sense of smell to be able to find food of their own. Now, moving on, in this case, the fact about having a sense of smell 100 times more powerful than humans is about the gray wolf. And if 40 times seemed like a lot, think about 100 times. And again, wolves use this to communicate with each other, but also to find food. So again, it's the sense of smell meeting their needs to live in a social situation by communication and also to find food. And then finally, the rattlesnake smells for prey using their tongues. They have these forked tongues, and they'll basically scoop scent particles from the ground and deposit them in this organ that they have in the tops of their mouths. And this will help them determine which direction to go to track their prey. So again, a really amazing adaptation in which they're using their sense of smell to find prey and survive. So as you probably noticed, all of those facts were about smell. And the reason for that is that today the topic of our lesson is nature observation, and particularly how can we use our sense of smell and learn from other animals to more effectively use our sense of smell to observe nature. And what does that do? How is that good for nature? And so the terms we're going to go over are observation, and our dominant sense for a lot of people is our sense of sight. And so a lot of times we associate observation with looking at things. And that is a part of observation, but we can also observe using our other senses. And so today we're going to learn how to observe more effectively using our sense of smell. And one of the ways we're going to do that is through mimicry, which is when we model our behaviors after another being's behaviors. So we're going to be mimicking some of these animals with amazing senses of smell in order to learn how we can use our own sense of smell more effectively. And this term is made up, but in Smelligence quotient, it's just a term I use to talk about our ability to identify different smells. And we're going to learn how we can build that IQ in order to be able to more effectively observe nature. And then finally, we're going to practice tracking, which is when you smell something and then try to find that thing's source rather than just smelling it and naming it. And so we'll learn a little bit more about how we can build that skill up. So to get started, we're going to learn from some of these animals like the wolverine here. And that's our first tip, is to strengthen our sense of smell, observe other animals. For example, we could observe a wolverine. If you're not at the zoo, though, you can also observe another animal with a great sense of smell, the dog. And one of the things that I've observed just today actually was I was letting my dog out into our yard. And it was interesting because my first thing was I started looking around to try to see if there were any animals or anything different. And he immediately had his nose to the ground and he was smelling around. And so it was a great example of how he was basically perceiving things that I had no idea were there. Perceiving, whether my neighbor's dog had been in the yard recently, what else was happening. So we can learn from those animals. Another thing we can do is we can close our eyes. Because vision is maybe our dominant sense, by closing our eyes, we're reducing that sense and forced to use our other senses, like our sense of smell. And then we can increase our insmelligence quotient. And I've got an activity that will help us do that. And then we can also learn to track smells. And I also have an opportunity or an activity about that. And before we move on, one thing that we can also do as we think about mimicking other animals is we can think about trying out different ways of smelling. A lot of times, when I smell something, I might take one breath and leave it at that. And if I can't smell it very strongly, I'll say, oh, I guess it doesn't smell very strongly. But if we look at other animals, we might notice that they smell differently. For example, a dog might take multiple shallow breaths, like, and so we can be playful and try those different ways of smelling to see if one of them helps us detect things that another one doesn't. So let's move on to those activities. The first activity is called What's That Smell? And by doing this activity, we're going to be increasing our reverence for and knowledge about animals' nature. And it'll increase our reverence because anytime we go outside and start focusing on things we might otherwise overlook is an opportunity to expand our sense of wonder and awe. And then our knowledge, because it'll give us a sense of what these different things that we might see outside smell like. And we can also strengthen our observation skills this way. So the supplies you'll need include a partner for this one, a cup, a field notebook, and a pencil. And the steps are to, first of all, go outside. If you can't go outside, you can also, though, do this inside with things that you can smell inside your home, for example. And then you're going to find a natural item with an interesting smell. Maybe it's grass, maybe it's wood chips, maybe it's pine needles, maybe it's a rock. And you're going to put it into that cup. And then you're going to ask your partner to close their eyes and smell the item in the cup. And you can then ask your partner to describe the item's smell before naming it, describe things it reminds them of maybe, and then open their eyes to see what it is. And this is a way for us to really focus in on what something smells like, because if I see wood chips, I'm just going to say, oh, those are wood chips. I'm not going to really think about what they smell like because I've already identified them. So this gives us a chance to do that process backwards and see what happens. And as we do this, let's just make sure that we're only picking up things that are safe to pick up, and we don't want to, pull a flower off of a plant. And we certainly don't want to scare animals or anything like that. We also want to make sure that we're only picking up things that we know won't harm us. So here's an example of something I picked up. I picked up some wood chips and put them in a cup, and then I could show that to my partner and have them try to identify this smell and describe it. The next activity, another short activity, is called Where's That Smell? And this will also increase our reverence, and it'll strengthen our observation and tracking skills. Because what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be trying to not just identify a smell, but identify the source of that smell. And for this, again, we'll need a partner, and then you'll need something like fresh coffee or popcorn, flowers, perfume, or something else with a strong smell. And for this one, you're going to ask your partner to close their eyes and then hide something with a strong aroma like fresh coffee, and then ask your partner to find the item using their sense of smell. And be sure to walk next to them to keep them safe, because they're not going to be using their eyes and we don't want them to bump into anything or trip over anything. So for example, I could make a bag of fresh popcorn and maybe tell a friend of mine, you know what, I made some popcorn for you, but you have to find it using your sense of smell. And then I can hide it and safely walk with them as they try to track it down. So this leads me to an action we can take. And this might sound like an unusual action, smelling and protecting nature. How can smelling nature lead us to protect it? And by taking this action, we're going to be increasing our senses of not just reverence, but also respect, and thinking about how we should, appropriately treat nature and animals. And then responsibility, realizing that we have the power to do things to help them. And then this this is also going to help ourselves and other people, animals, and the environment. And I'll explain how. You won't need any supplies for this one. So I want to direct you to some studies that have found how important natural smells are to our own mental health as humans. And one study in particular found that smelling nature lowered people's physiological stress. So what that means is that if we were to go outside and walk through a garden like this with these flowers, we might be less stressed after that experience. And as much as I think that it's important for us to do things to protect nature and animals, just because, regardless of what kind of benefits that has for us, I think this is a great example of how doing something that can help us also helps animals and the environment. Because planting a garden like this will minimize our stress, decrease our stress, but it'll also provide habitat for animals like pollinators. And those pollinators will play an important role in the environment. So it's what I think of as a triple win, where it's a win for us, it's a win for other animals, and it's a win for the environment. And that leads me back to the Detroit Zoological Society and the Berman Academy for Humane Education. Now, this picture here was actually taken at the Detroit Zoo. And the Detroit Zoo is a great example of a place that has lots of gardens and other green spaces that we can go out and we can reduce our stress by using our senses of, among other things, our sense of smell. And the Berman Academy for Humane Education has the mission of helping people help animals. And this is a really interesting example of how doing something that helps us can also help other animals and the environment. So this week, I would encourage you to spend some time observing nature through your sense of smell, and maybe even try out those activities, and then start to reflect on what you can do to encourage other people to get out and observe nature with their sense of smell as well, and some actions that you can take to protect green spaces so that we as humans can benefit from the smells of nature, but also animals in the environment can also benefit from them. So I hope you've enjoyed this activity. If you're interested in more virtual vitamin Z, be sure to check out our website at detroitzoo.org and then click on the link for education and go down to online learning. Until then, stay safe and have a great day. Bye.